well.
Yeah.
That's not a criticism of Piastri
No.
at all. That's just saying Lando is really performing.
He's the
well.
main man.
Staking his claim as that first driver at McLaren. Yeah, McLaren have been brilliant the last couple of weeks.
Nico Hülkenberg making Q3 again, and Magnussen out in Q1. You know, that's it's starting to get. I know he's done a lot for Hülkenberg and for the team so far this year, but it's starting. The difference is starting to become pretty obvious between those two.
Hello and welcome to On Track GP right here on DR Sports. It was Imola this weekend. We were back racing in Europe and, you know, back to winning ways for Red Bull. Joining us today is Rich and Robbie. Did you enjoy being back at Ferrari's home race?
It's nice to be back in Europe. Nice to be back at an old school, old-fashioned circuit. You know, one that isn't forgiving. We saw loads of people having moments and going into gravel, realizing that they are human after all. I'm a big fan of these old school circuits. Okay, the race wasn't the most exciting, but to see the drivers actually have to hustle and work is pretty cool.
Did you like it, Rob?
Yeah, it was a good race. It's hard to overtake there, isn't it? That's the only thing. But I thought it was a good race, and if there'd have been a few more laps, man, Lando, man, he was bearing down. Hey, listen, I was so pleased for him. You know what I mean? I mean, following up that victory with that performance there, you know what I mean? I mean, he's really emerging now, isn't he?
And he's upped his game big time against Piastri as well. That's not a criticism of Piastri at all. That's just saying Lando is really performing.
He's the main man.
Staking his claim as that first driver at McLaren. Yeah, McLaren have been brilliant the last couple of weeks. We'll just start with kind of free practice. In the first one, there was a red flag, Alex Albon. There was quite a few actually over the weekend, especially in free practice 3. There was 2. Fernando Alonso crashed into the final corner. He lost control, ended up going backwards into the barrier, and Sergio Perez as well. He brought that red flag back out in the final 5 minutes after crashing. Kind of took the curb, went into the barriers and into that chicane. Why is there so many red flags at this circuit?
I mean, Imola is one of those tracks. Like you get these newer circuits which have been designed by Herman Tilke, like Shanghai is a good example. It's very, very technical and it's all about the technique. Imola is a proper old school circuit which hasn't been touched for a long time, and you just have to grab the car by the scruff of the neck and absolutely hustle it. There's not, the technique kind of goes out the window there. You just grab it, and it's like riding a bucking bronco. It's, you know, you really have to be aggressive, and you have to take as much curb as you can. And obviously with gravel everywhere, no tarmac runoffs, grass, you know, a millimeter you could get away with at a big modern style circuit like Shanghai, as I said. You know, Imola, you just can't get away with it. And the walls are close. And as I said, it's so cool to have these circuits where you actually see the drivers have to hustle and earn their money, you know.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's just one of those things. You're seeing how on the edge these guys are.
Yeah, well, qualifying, again, you mentioned the gravel there. That was kind of a theme of that qualifying. Alex Albon, he was on for a quick lap in Q1, but he ran wide into the gravel, as did Fernando Alonso. He kind of struggled with the grip as well, and ended up being last on the grid on Sunday. So it's one of those tracks that, as you said, like, you've really got to be aggressive with it, but being too aggressive can end you up in that gravel.
Yeah, exactly. And it's tough as well because it's very low deck, that circuit. So it's actually, and to warm the tires up and get the energy into the tires, really, really tricky. So you're absolutely flat out for the whole thing. And yeah, we saw it, and it was, I think Fernando just didn't have as good a weekend as he normally has. Even he's allowed an off weekend sometimes. And yeah, that was why he suffered.
Rob, Lewis Hamilton, he just scraped through on Q1, P15. Again, not the best in terms of qualifying. Did well to kind of rectify the race, ending in P6. But again, you're just being a bit disappointed with him this year.
Yeah, the disappointment continues. I guess they just think, you know, he keeps moaning about the car though, isn't it? So he just doesn't have the car. I think it was a better week for him than previous races. But, you know, we're used to seeing the guy right at the top, innit? So...
Well, not lately.
Exactly. Not for a while now.
Those Ferrari fans reconsidering their decision, you know, after seeing Ollie Bearman again. It's one of those things.
Yeah, actually, you touched on that. I was going to come to him. So we can go to Ollie Bearman. I mean, he's just been so impressive, hasn't he?
Oh yeah, he's a star of the future. You know, it's very, very obvious. Ignore everything that's going on in Formula 2. I've worked in that category, and to be honest, it's a bit like being in a casino with some of the stuff that goes on. But to see what he's done when he's had the most amount of pressure on him, obviously Jeddah, and then here again, he did a solid job. It's a matter of time until we're going to see him in Formula 1, and it's good because see these young gen coming through, it's putting the old guard like Hamilton and people under pressure, because Ollie Bearman's certainly not going to be asking for the salary demands that Lewis Hamilton is. So it means that Hamilton will have to justify his place at Ferrari.
Yeah, well, he's got multiple planned sessions ahead, hasn't he, with HAAS? And he did participate in FP1 in one of the sessions this weekend. So he's definitely one to keep an eye on. I mean, if he's not in a seat, I think maybe next season, I think we're sitting there thinking, what's going on here?
Yeah,
we need to see him progress. And we don't want to see him go to Indy, because that's obviously what some drivers are starting to do. But just back to qualifying. So out in Q1 was Bottas, Sargent, Zhou, Magnussen and Alonso. The only one there really screaming anything probably that we'd raise an eyebrow to would be Alonso. But this track just didn't suit him, did it?
It didn't suit him. But the other one I'd jump in there is just on the Ollie Bearman subject. Nico Hülkenberg making Q3 again, and Magnussen out in Q1. You know, that's it's starting to get. I know he's done a lot for Hülkenberg and for the team so far this year, but the difference is starting to become pretty obvious between those two. Obviously, Hülkenberg moving to Audi next year is going to make things easier for Magnussen to hold that seat, but it's something to keep an eye on. It's starting to become a trend. But yeah, Alonso just didn't have his usual good weekend. As I said, I think even he's allowed an off weekend. Yeah,
he did, because it's rare that he, I guess, gets out qualified by Lance Stroll, who went out in Q2. Perez, Ocon, Stroll, Albon, and Gasly. Perez again. What did you make? Because this kind of became a bit of a theme last year, didn't it? That he never kind of really made it that often to Q3. Hasn't been so bad this year, but again, you want to be seeing the both Red Bulls really starting.
Your main drivers like winning every single race,
yeah,
and you're driving essentially the same car, and you're so far off it. You have to ask questions that he should be competing with Max.
Yeah, he has to.
Yeah, he should be competing with Max, I do often think to myself, if he didn't have that huge Mexican support, would he be in that car?
Well, probably not. It's the revenue that he brings in, isn't it?
Yeah, because he's so... How can you be so far off and you're in the same car? I mean, you'll be able to answer. You're a driver, but don't you feel that he should be a lot closer?
The first person that you get compared to is your teammate, and it's a very, very difficult situation if your teammate is quicker than you, because you can either look at it in two ways. You can look at it in a way that, which is the hardest way to look at it, is go accept it and go, okay, how can I improve? And I think we've seen that with Sergio this year. He's actually upped his game and kind of realized he just needs to focus on certain areas. Or you can go into the spiral of what he was like last year, where you kind of get a bit angsty about it. Then you start overdriving, mistakes come in. This is obviously, they've all come out and they said as long as he's a good number two, and he has been doing that so far this year. But the emergence of McLaren now is going to put a bit more pressure on him. Lando especially is starting to be seriously impressive.
Yeah, 100%. And also he's again someone that's driving for a contract. We don't think that's going to be at Red Bull, so he needs to always be consistent. If he's going to go into another team and be that first driver.
Exactly, especially with silly season coming up in a whole new dimension.
Yeah, definitely extremely silly. Verstappen he took pole, just a 10th ahead of Piastri, and P3 was Norris. So those McLarens are looking great. And then P4 and 5 was Leclerc and Sainz. So we are seeing again kind of that third spot is not really Mercedes anymore, is it? It's kind of being taken over by McLaren.
Yeah, exactly. It's and I'm all for that. I'm a Lando Norris fan, and Oscar Piastri especially. It's good to have a Brit taking over the mantle if Lewis and George aren't able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also Piastri, he was given that 3-place penalty on the grid for impeding Magnussen, so that dropped into P5. Promoted Norris to P2, Leclerc P3, and Sainz P4 as we headed into the race. Sergio Perez, he started on a hard tyre. As opposed to most of the rest of the cars on the grid. What did you make of that? Because he ended the race in P8. So
you've got to do, as Robbie said earlier, that place is so hard to overtake, right? You've got to try something different. Do you think
that worked well then, I guess, from where he was on the grid?
Yeah, but I don't think he had a choice. He's faster than the cars in front, but if it's so hard to overtake, if you do exactly what they're going to do, then you're kind of stuck, right? So you've got to try something a bit different.
Just meant he could stay out longer, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it did. Again, Fernando Alonso, he had a few issues with the front brakes. They were on fire as he left the pit lane. We always love it when things like that happen.
I love the way, when it was on fire, and have you ever had this? He just literally just sped up to just get rid of the fire.
To be honest,
if that was me, I'd be like, oh my God, I'd be pulling it over to jump out of that.
It's quite a regular occurrence in a track like Imola because you have to brake so hard for the last corner, which is downhill. The brakes, the Formula One brakes at max temperature get up to over 1,000 degrees, and average temperatures around the track are probably about 500. So they haven't had a chance to cool down, which obviously the air does. And then during that pit stop, all of a sudden the airflow completely stops, and sometimes bits of rubber can get on the brake. And it's when that rubber gets on the brake, the rubber then ignites. But as soon as you get going and you get that air, it cools them down by like 200-300 degrees, and the fire goes. It's quite a I wouldn't say a normal thing, but it's not unexpected.
No, because I was thinking if that was
in
me,
that car as well, I'd be out.
I'll be jumping out of that car, pull over.
If it happens on your road car, I'd be a little bit more worried.
Yeah, I think I would care less if it was on my own car because you're literally not in a tiny little box that is filled with fuel.
Yeah, and electronics and everything else.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, you technically are in a box that's filled with fuel, but like not as close to the ground with it. I want to ask you, because this was one of two, I guess, home races for Ferrari. And they did all right, a decent weekend, but it's not the winning ways that I guess Ferrari fans would want to see at the home races.
No, of course it's not. I mean, the Ferrari, the Italian press generally, I mean, like we see it in football as well, they're just sort of constantly on the back of people if they don't perform. And I think it's there wouldn't be. It's not great to not see them perform at Imola, but I don't think there would be huge panic because they have made a step this year.
Yeah.
And this Imola is a very unique circuit, and I don't think it's going to be a similar trend through the rest of it. Obviously, Monaco next. That's a completely unique circuit. No one knows what's going to happen there. So I wouldn't be panicking too much if I was Ferrari.
Okay.
But I think McLaren have very firmly cemented themselves as the second best team.
Is that because of the upgrades that they've had?
I think it is because you remember last year they were diabolical after the first race, but they clearly know what they're doing in the upgrade department because they came good.
Well, it was interesting because Lando was complaining of no pace against the cars behind him. That was on lap 36. Obviously, the team kind of assured him that wasn't the case. It's an interesting thing to hear him say that because he's been running Max pretty close the last couple of weeks.
I think this is just a case of normal racing drivers. I speaking as one, we are a bit of prima donnas. And we do like to complain. And I think that if you're finishing second in a Grand Prix and you're running at the front and you're complaining of no pace, I think you need to look at the reality of the situation. I think that was just one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was catching Max at the end, so he had pace.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to run through this grid and then we'll talk about obviously the man that we always love to talk about. I love to talk about is Max. So it was Alex Albon with a DNF. Obviously had to retire. Fernando Alonso, Valtteri Bottas, Sargent. Probably one of the only times he actually ever finishes above Albon. Gasly, Zhou Guanyu, Ocon, Danny Rick in 13. He's still here, guys. He's still racing. We thought he'd be long gone. He's hanging on by a thread.
Hanging on by a thread.
Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hulkenberg in P11s have just missed out on the points. Yuki Tsunoda, Lance Stroll. Again, another one who doesn't usually finish above Fernando. Sergio Perez, P8. George Russell, 7. Lewis Hamilton, 6. 5th was Carlos Sainz, 4th Oscar Piastri, Charles Leclerc in 3rd, Lando 2nd, and Max Verstappen back on pole. We love to see it, but Lando running him really close again. Max complained. He did say his tyres weren't working. Is it this thing that, again, kind of you just mentioned, like the prima donna thing? Yeah. Every time maybe the Red Bull isn't at the exact place that Max wants it to be, there is the tyre or the floor.
Honestly, Max says something. I think they just put it on the. I think they just put it on the TV radio just for entertainment. He says something every race, but I honestly, from where Red Bull actually started this weekend though. And then where Sergio actually finished it, he kind of finished it where they started. For Max to actually end up where he ended up, I think Max really had an incredible weekend. It was one of those where the driver rose above the potential of the car. And I think this might be understated because we're so used to it now, but I think Max really, he was very impressive this weekend.
I think that's the thing. Everyone just says, oh, it's boring because Max is always winning. But you have to give credit to how good of a driver, generational driver. You know, we've had the Schumachers, we've had the Sennas, we've had the Hamilton eras. This is the Max Verstappen era.
Yeah. I mean, he's an unbelievable driver. and he was getting pushed in the race.
Yeah, exactly.
He even said it at the end, didn't he? He goes,
and
I got pushed today. I mean,
but I think he probably,
Robbie.
but I think he probably quite likes being pushed because I reckon look, I'm not a driver, you are, but it probably does get boring if you are 30 seconds ahead, which he was for quite a lot of races, especially last season. So if you've got someone racing not too far behind you, that does make it kind of interesting.
It's a lot more satisfying to win a race that you've had to hustle for and really work for than it is to drive off into the field. But saying that, like all athletes, racing drivers and Formula One drivers have humongous egos. So the ego side always wants you to win by 30 seconds. And Max said that in an interview. But the racer in you and the fanboy of the sport or fangirl of the sport, you want to have a hard battle and hustle for the win. So it's kind of mixed emotions, But I think we're going to see McLaren get closer and closer, and I think the rest of the season is actually going to be very entertaining.
Yeah, I hope so. Look, I absolutely love McLaren, love both drivers. But just on Max, he matched Ayrton Senna's record of 8 pole positions in a row on the circuit where Senna started his final race. Also matched Michael Schumacher with 3 successive wins at Imola. Max, again, took part in a 24-hour sim race while competing at the Grand Prix as well, and he competed with his own team, Team Redline, took part in the virtual 24 hours of Nürburgring on Saturday night from his motorhome at the Imola circuit. The team would later go on to win the event on Sunday. Of course, everything he touches turns to gold.
Superhuman.
I mean, that's people don't realize the level of these esports teams in Formula One. It's like a serious level. And the Nordschleife is 176 corners. It's 14. I think it's 14 miles or something. And that's no easy feat what he did there. No. I know it's a computer game and everything, but for all the gamers out there, they'll understand how hard that actually is.
Yeah, we'll give them all the credit for it. Just some other race stats for you. 3rd successive Q3 appearance for Nico Hülkenberg. First ever time to race at Imola in his career, which is wild because you think he's been around for absolutely ages.
Yeah, to be honest, Imola's not used for much. They have a lot of noise problems there because the circuit's literally built in a village almost. There's actually a school in the circuit enclosure and houses along the straight. Right. So they have a lot of noise issues. I mean, I've only raced there once in 23 years of racing. Well, 13 years in cars. So.
Well, next up is Monaco. So it's technically another home race for a Ferrari driver in Charles Leclerc.
It's a home race for every driver. Literally.
Yeah.
They all live there, don't
they?
True,
tax free, It's not my favourite circuit. For the history, it's beautiful and I love it. But as a racing circuit, I personally don't love it.
I agree. I despise it. However, I went to the Monaco Grand Prix in 2022 and I thought it's not my sort of place generally. But I thought, I had to go there for work. But I actually really enjoyed the event. As an event, it was awesome. I actually highly recommend to anybody, if you want to go to a Grand Prix, Monaco is worth going
for the weekend. The weekend looks fabulous.
It's awesome. Yeah, and there's something for everybody. It's not just what you see with the yachts and stuff like that. There's a great nightlife, great atmosphere. It's really, really good.
Do you like it, Rob?
Yeah, I'd love to go to. I've never been to Monaco. I'd love to go to. I've been to Monaco.
Just itself. There, but not for the race.
I've never been to the race. So actually, when I went to Monaco, you can walk the track sort of thing, which is pretty cool. But I get that it's not everybody's favourite because it's just so hard to overtake. So
it's going to be very boring.
Yeah, whoever finishes on pole, and I'd love them to do something more to. But every time I watch it, though, it's just so historic. You know what I mean? Like it's just so. You see the cars going through those streets. It's just so iconic. Yeah. So I enjoy it because of that. Just it's just the whole Monaco. James Bondy type feel I just get
it's very James Bond.
Yeah, when I watch that race, so even though the race as an actual Formula One race is not great, but I enjoy it because it's Monaco
and when it rains, which it does quite a lot, it gets very exciting.
Yes,
I'd love to go to that race. That's
highly recommended.
The one I'd really love to go to.
Let's make it happen.
Any mates on any yachts out there?
Get us out there.
Richard,
no comment.
Right, I've seen them yachts out there, man. They're like
while we see if Richard has a plug for that. Obviously, guys, let us know your thoughts on Monaco, which is up next. Let us know who you think is going to be top 3. Of course, we'll be talking about it. We will talk about it in depth next week, but who is your top 3, just predicting outright?
I'm going to go Lando, Max, Oscar.
Wow, big one. But yeah, as you said, whoever starts first is probably going to end up finishing first.
Yeah, it's Verstappen on pole. I think, let's Lando again, and let's mix it up a bit. I think there'll be a Ferrari in there, Leclerc.
I think so as well. But I'm going to swap them. I'm going to go Max, Charles Leclerc, and then I'm going to put Lando. But I think Carlos Sainz will be battling for that third spot as well.
Quite varied.
Yeah, it's very varied. We're not we're not even talking about Mercedes anymore, are we? How times have changed. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, guys. We will see you next week. Don't forget to make sure you like and subscribe right here on DR Sports, and we will see you next week for On Track GP.